Quiet Riot. Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School. The amuse-bouche, the appetizer, the spicy little canapé at the weekend ahead of the full fat feast of the main show on Thursday. I'm Naomi Smith.
And I'm Alex Andreou, and I have to say my bush is very amused. Here to remind you that our Ko-Fi supporters now have a Discord channel to chat to each other and to us, to share ideas for future shows, make new friends, bitch about us behind our back.
In front of us, actually.
That's true. If you sign up at ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod, you'll be able to join us. We'll drop a little link to the Discord app in our show notes as well for you.
And I'm going to just remind you to have a listen to Alex's show with Layla Moran MP if you haven't done so already. It really is a superb episode. It's the right mix, I found, of emotional yet pragmatic, somber, but really optimistic and hopeful. Laughter, and if you listen all the way to the end, also some tears. So yeah, do go and have a listen. I found it really moving and quite uplifting. Quiet Riot.
Now, Naomi, we are recording on Saturday evening because we have a podcast now in place of a social life. And this is how we spend our Saturdays.
Yeah.
Labour has been in power for 100 days today, so it seems a good moment to take stock.
Yeah, but is it? I mean, why 100 days? Why has this become a thing?
That is a question, right? Because it's a very American thing. It basically started with Roosevelt, who came in after the Wall Street crash in 1929. Roosevelt came in the early 1930s and implemented a huge legislative program for America to get out of the Depression.
Yeah.
And he did all of that in his first 100 days. And that's when the term started being coined. But it wasn't really a thing for British prime ministers until Cameron. The first reference I found to a British prime minister's first 100 days, from the time, I should say, because there's a book about Tony Blair's first 100 days, but it was written after the event, if that makes sense. But the first time newspapers en masse were marking a prime minister's first 100 days and sort of taking stock how they'd done was with Cameron. Yep. And I think actually there is a problem with that. The reason it's a popular concept in America is because a president has 2 months plus a bit to put together their cabinet.
Of being president-elect, you mean?
Of being president-elect before they get inaugurated and start implementing their program. And also, of course, in America, there are midterm elections, during which either Congress or Senate or both change hands, because Americans seem to like to clip presidents' wings, if that makes sense. They don't like the president and the same party to hold all three. And so there is a genuinely, first of all, a preparation period, and second of all, a more limited time to get big things done. And if you look at the situation here, especially with this election, cold as it was in the summer, there have actually been, I calculated, 25 sitting days
of
in Parliament.
Yeah. Because there were rumours that they were going to scrap summer holidays in August and they were all going to have to sit through the summer and everything. And then
they scrapped some of it.
They did.
And the summer recess was just the month of August this time. And then conference season, you see, it's still a very short time in which to be saying they're doing well, they're doing badly. But anyway, it's where we are. We do this now, it seems. Even though it makes zero sense, as so many other things in our politics, we're stuck with it.
Indeed. And I think, there are sort of two versions being written up. There's, what a torrid, awful, depressing time, no honeymoon period whatsoever. And then those that are doing the complete opposite, saying, no, it's all been wonderful. Look at all the amazing policy things that they've done. Let's judge them on those. And it may not surprise listeners to know that I land somewhere in between all of that. On the policy stuff, though, it has been pretty good, right? Lifting bans on onshore wind, approving whopping big new solar farms, closing the incredibly cruel and ridiculous and oftentimes dirty Bibi Stockholm.
Yeah.
Ending the absolutely disgraceful Rwanda scheme that should have never come anywhere near British politics. Ending the doctors' strikes almost immediately. You know, there have been some incredible things that have been done. And I think it is still early days. I know that that is not quite the case in people facing council re-election next May, or those in Scotland running for the Scottish Parliament or the Welsh Senedd within a year and a half or so. But there is still time to turn it around. But I think they just need to get so much better at communicating their raison d'etre, because there has been a lot of negativity. There has been a lot of all tough times, and you know, we're going to have to brace ourselves for some difficult, tough decisions in order to get through to sunnier uplands. And I think implementing good policies is very, very, very important. And I like many of them, but it is only one part of being good at politics and good at governing. And you do have to win hearts and minds as well. And the polling shows they're not doing that bit well enough yet.
Yeah, that's true. So I also fall somewhere in between. I have found some aspects of what they're doing very disappointing. I have found some aspects of the timidity of what they do actually really disappointing, because, you know, when you have 5 years ahead of you and a big majority,
now's your chance, baby.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they've come in very gingerly, it's like they're still carrying that fucking Ming Vase, and it's like, put the vase down. The vase is done now.
Or was it Ming Vase, or was it that they didn't have ideas? Because when you think about previous governments that have come in after a very long period in opposition, they are normally champing at the bit and try and push stuff through quite quickly. When we think about the early days of coalition, there was a lot that got pushed through very, very quickly. I think they even used some kind of like weird emergency powers and legislation, and some listener will probably write in and tell me what I'm referring to, because I can't remember it myself, but may have even been something related to terror organisation in order to push through the stuff they were really desperate to do on academies. And I haven't felt that yet, other than release the prisoners. I mean, that was a kind of a day one, get them out. But there just sort of doesn't seem to have been enough. Oh, yeah, wow. You know, not only do we desperately want to do this for a really long time, we've now, as you say, Alex, got this enormous mandate to be able to do things and a decent chunk of time ahead of us to turn things around. If some,
I mean, they are doing a lot of stuff, right? Especially considering what I've just said, that there's only been 25 sitting days. I was having a look against the King's speech, and actually there's been a lot of activity. But I wonder, you know, you mentioned the revocation of the ban of onshore wind, the solar farm approvals. Revoking ban on onshore wind was the 8th of July. On the 9th of July, the Wealth Fund was announced that will invest in green energy. Then the solar farm was approved. Then, I think on the 20th of July, somewhere around there, was the Great British Energy Bill.
Indeed.
And I just think, is that a coincidence?
No.
That it's Ed Miliband's department that's been most active?
I don't think it is. And I can't remember if I said this after Labour Party conference on the show that I did. In a haze of tiredness I haven't felt since I was in my freshers week at university 20 odd years ago. But I remember saying to myself...
Yes, let's call it tiredness.
Yes, extreme tiredness. What struck me was, among the general shell-shockedness of those in government, the standout department is Ed Miliband's, and that they are doing an enormous amount of stuff, and they are really showing off about how much they're doing. So they're getting that perfect balance between the doing stuff and then they're telling everyone that they're doing stuff. And I put that down to somebody who'd had much more experience than many other people and has such a good command of their department because they've held the shadow brief for so long, which isn't so true of some of the other cabinet members.
That's true. But also rail nationalisation, the renters' bill, the workers' rights bill. There's been some big pieces of legislation. And there's been some big pieces of legislation that the last government mulled over for really 2 years and then didn't manage to get done.
Indeed.
So, like I said, if you take a cold, hard look at King's speech and then legislative activity against that, considering there's only been 25 sitting days, I would give this government an A+ on that front. They really have got on with doing stuff. Add to that, I don't think I've ever seen a prime minister have this many summits and bilaterals and state visits in their first period either.
Those new clothes aren't going to show off themselves, are they, Alex?
He really has trotted the globe and met a lot of key people that he needs on side. The weakness, I think, is the budget. In retrospect, I'm not offering this as wisdom that I had at the time. In retrospect, leaving this long a gap between being elected and actually announcing the budget was a huge mistake, I think, because there's a lot of departments that are basically waiting for that in order to kick into gear. Businesses, investment is waiting for that in order to kick into gear. I know why they did it. They did it in order to signal that this is going to be a period of order and normality. But actually what happened is that the vacuum that was created, I was looking at when previous governments did their budget, and it's never more than 5-6 weeks. I think one of them was 8 weeks. There's never been a government that came into power and said, we will do our budget in 20 weeks' time.
I wonder to what extent, though, that might be something to do with the disaster budget of Kwarteng and Truss. My God, we cannot fuck this up.
Yeah, it's everything
Look
to do
how
with
the markets react. We have got to do all the reassurances ahead of time. We've got to roll
the pitch. We've got to get it right, signal the right stuff. All of that is right, but I don't think they got that balance right. And again, maybe it's to do with that recess period, that once you decide effectively you're not going to do the budget in the first 4 weeks, then it's recess, very short time in September, conference recess, and then we're into October.
I mean, we still don't have select committee members in place. We only have the chairs, and the chairs took far longer than is normal because of the odd timing of having a July election and then not having the number of sitting days to get it all done. Plus, I think there was a bit of horse trading going on between Davey, Sunak and Starmer over how many each would get. But yes, everything is going a little bit more slowly than we would normally expect in parliamentary terms.
Quiet, Riot. In that vacuum that was created by not having the budget soon enough for people to start talking about policy, came, first of all, the riots, and then the constant 22 billion black hole, and then the announcement on the winter fuel allowance, all of that stuff. And then, of course, the freebies row, the donations row, which, as you know, I think is blown out of all proportion by really a media class, I think, that's forgotten how to do its job, to be honest.
They were lazily spoon-fed government by campaigning and headline and sensational slogan for at least 5 years.
Yeah.
And I was sort of thinking about this in relation to today's show, and where Starmer's government isn't doing so well is where Johnson's did superbly. I hated every minute of it, but the messaging, for people that don't pay much attention to what's going on in politics, who are maybe, half listening to the news on in the background while they eat their lunch or their dinner, get Brexit done, oven-ready deal, stop the boats. These are very easy. Oh, okay, I broadly understand what the government's doing from hearing that.
Yeah.
Now they don't, and they don't realise that none of those things ever actually gets done, and that is not governing, it is sloganeering. But they are fucking good at comms for the masses, and Labour aren't yet. And I think...
And when they came in, when they won that election in December 2019, there was a sense of energy. There was a sense of ebullience when they first came in, and there wasn't with Starmer's government. Like I said, I understand why there wasn't. I understand what their pitch was. I just don't think they got the balance right. But there is also an immensely hostile Hostile
media.
and lazy media. I mean, hostile and fucking lazy media. I was watching the pool interview that Starmer did yesterday after the summit of all the mayors and the first ministers, etc.
Regions and nations.
Yeah. An interesting thing, right? An interesting constitutional development and quite a welcome one. And their first meeting, they set out their remit, basically. And there was also a massive investment announced. There was also, I mean, if you want to go negative, there was also the massive row with P&O ferries. There are 2 wars going on. It's not like there was a shortage of things to talk about. So he was doing the pool interview. He makes his opening statement. And the very first question that comes from the pool journalist that's asking questions basically on behalf of all the journalists, that's how pool interviews work. And so the first question, and the journalist actually tried to interrupt Starmer several times to come in with this question: will you approve Sue Gray's severance payment?
We've had a really constructive discussion about economic growth, about jobs, about investment, and even today we've had a further announcement of £24 billion investment in the United Kingdom. I set out when we won that election to change the country for the better, to stabilise the economy. And these investments that are coming in day by day, they're a drumbeat into our investment summit on Monday, which is bringing together some of the leading, CEOs across the world. So for everybody listening and watching this who's concerned to know, is there going to be investment in my region? Are there going to be jobs where I live? The answer is today we're going a long way down the road of collaborating to that end.
Prime Minister, will you approve Sue Gray's severance payment?
Look, we've had a really important meeting today of the Council of Regions and Nations, which is hugely important for the country. We've had a huge investment of 24
Can't
billions
answer whether or
of
not
pounds,
you'll approve her
24
severance
billions
payment.
of pounds.
I mean, I'm not saying that's not a matter of public interest, but when that is the top of your list, it means you are addicted to the soap opera. You are addicted to the gossip and the small, insignificant stuff. It's nothing to do with what the government is doing. There is plenty of meaty substance to get your teeth into. Even if you want to rip the government to shreds, there was plenty of stuff to get into.
Frankly, Alex, the whole media circus around the Sue Gray stuff since the announcement of her appointment, which of course happened a long time before she even started the role, has been grotesque. Nothing short of it. How dare the woman who investigated the lockdown parties not be punished? How dare she rise to prominence? How dare she have a senior role in the Labour Party and then in government? I think there is a misogyny in it.
Oh, for sure.
And this is somebody who has spent their entire career up to the last 100 days as a civil servant, not being political, keeping out of the public eye, supporting those who are in it. Suddenly, under the media spotlight, I think she must have had an absolutely brutal time. And I feel quite sorry for her. I don't think she should have been appointed to such a political job.
I agree.
That does not mean that she wasn't also harassed mercilessly by a media that were out to get her.
I mean, honestly, if you have your eye on that person, you think they will be useful in your operation, leave them where they are and make them cabinet secretary when you're in government. That's the position, right? That would have been the position for Sue Gray, succeeding Simon Case as cabinet secretary, the person that manages the departmental relationships behind the scenes. That was the job. That aside, there is an enormous rewriting of history that moves from Johnson and the media that are his allies. This whole thing about freebies, about donations, and about Sue Gray has not been just about attacking the government, has not even been primarily about attacking the government, I think. That's just a delightful bonus for all those right-wing publications. It's been about rehabilitating Boris Johnson, about saying the dirty donation stuff is no big deal because everyone does it. Breaking the rules is no big deal because everyone does it. And look, by the way, the person that found him guilty was compromised.
You know what? It's even worse than that, Alex. These very same journalists are the ones that are saying, oh, no, it does matter if you break the rules if you're Starmer. It doesn't if you're Johnson because it's priced in. I've seen that written so many times in the last week. I can't tell you.
And the response,
everyone expects it doesn't matter if Johnson does it. It does matter if Starmer and his team do it.
And the rationalization of that, the response on that is that, well, that's because of the hypocrisy. We're pointing out the hypocrisy. It's Starmer that went after Johnson in a big way for donations and gifts, etc., etc. And it's like, you are rewriting history. The reason Johnson got in trouble with donations is because he didn't declare them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the gold wallpaper. It's the fact that the gold wallpaper was found out about 6 months later, and it wasn't declared in any way. And Johnson ended up then claiming that it was a loan and paying it back out of his own pocket 6 months later because he was found out. The reason the holidays in Mystique and I think it was Marbella, they were not declared. The takeaways, the 30 grand's worth of takeaways that were arriving into Downing Street via a back door from a courier that had a code name were not declared. That's the reason Johnson got into trouble, for doing things under the table. He didn't get into trouble for taking donations, because all our politics works via donations. The biggest rewriting of history is this idea that you made a fuss when it was just about a bit of cake. And that I find just profoundly offensive, actually, to people like you who couldn't be with your father when he was dying.
Indeed.
While he fucking partied.
Indeed.
It wasn't about cake. It was about a prime minister, for the first time in our entire history, a prime minister incurring a criminal penalty while in office for breaking rules that he imposed on the rest of us. Rules which were difficult to keep to and punitive, and for good reason, and he just ignored them. That's what the fuss was about. And it wasn't Sue Gray that cost him his job.
He did.
Sue Gray's report, if anything, was very, very mild. Remember, she kept to her remit incredibly tightly, which means that she never investigated, for instance, stuff that went on in their flat. Upstairs. So the ABBA party, for instance, was never investigated because it was outside her remit. She was appointed by Johnson. It's not like she sought out this poisoned chalice of putting together a report on him. She was appointed because Simon Case had to recuse himself because he was at one of the parties.
Exactly.
As you can see in photos.
And the Sue Gray report wasn't the downfall of Johnson.
No.
It was fucking Chris Pincher.
Exactly. So when Johnson came out and he used Sue Gray's report, he thanked her profusely for doing such an amazing and professional and objective job. And he used her report to stay in power.
Exactly.
Not only it didn't cost him his job, he used that report to stay in power. And now everyone is going around with this shortened story that's straight out of Guido and Harry Cole, that somehow Sue Gray had an agenda before and somehow managed to what? Engineer Johnson having parties, engineer Johnson appointing her to be the judge of that. None of that was possible, and that she brought Johnson down. All of that is untrue, all of it.
Well, Alex, we dwelt on what has definitely been 100 days of two halves. There has been good and bad. Let's move on to the next 100 days, which I think probably takes us to like mid-January kind of time. We will, of course, have the budget. And you said that is, the thing that we need, so that everybody else can get on and decide what they can afford to do or not. Anything else that you're hoping for in the next couple of months?
Yeah, it takes us to 20th of January, actually. I'm hoping to see a tightening up of the comms. They've been too lax, but I hope that doesn't come at the cost of the administrative stuff that needed to happen, because in many ways, The reason Sue Gray was there was because there needs to be a radical rethink and rejig of departments, I think.
Mm.
And that can only happen after the budget. So it's really quite wretched that she had to go before that was done. But I'm sure the work has been done in the background. I hope to see them proceed with the same urgency legislatively, but really get control of the grid, guys. I remember just after...
And like, you have so much control to do it when you're Prime Minister.
Absolutely.
Like, they have to report.
Everyone hangs on your very on your every word.
Quiet, Riot.
I remember when we recorded just after the election, I said that after Labour are elected, people would not cut them a lot of slack. I knew that because I've seen it in Greece, you know.
Yeah.
I've seen that left-wing governments or centre-left governments are held to a much higher standard than right-wing governments. And so I said they would have to be seen to be doing a lot in their first 100 days. And they have done a lot, but they've not seemed to be doing it, which is in many ways an even worse tragedy than if they had been actually useless.
Yeah.
So that is the job in the next 100 days, to try and close that gulf between government activity and perception of government activity.
Yeah.
They are actually doing a lot of good stuff. They are doing a lot of popular stuff.
But they need to own it. Yeah.
They need to put it out there. They need to be in campaigning mode. And they've just fallen out of that completely.
Well, one of the very popular things that they can do, of course, is on Europe. We know from the polling how popular a much better trade deal is. And I think we're going to have some progress on that in the next 100 days. There will be more meetings, whether that's between the lower level ministers or whether it's between von der Leyen and Starmer themselves again. I think we will see more in that. This week, we had a very good bit of news coming from Business Minister Johnny Reynolds, Secretary of State for Business and Trade. He was saying that he is going to revamp the Board of Trade.
Yeah.
Now, the Board of Trade, for listeners that don't know, at the moment is the most ridiculous, perfunctory nonsense grouping of Tory sympathetic so-called advisors to the government. So it's not on a statutory footing. It's got no power. Kemi Badenoch put people in there like, Daniel Hannan and others who...
Tony Abbott was in there, wasn't it?
Of course, Australia's Tony Abbott. I mean, why we don't think there is a glaring conflict of interest for the former Prime Minister of another country to be advising us on our trade deals. I mean, ridiculous. And so what Best of Britain has been calling for is to say, scrap it and set up something akin to an OBR for trade that can do independent impact assessments on changes to trade deals, reviewing the trade deals that are on the table. And then parliamentarians will be able to vote knowing that, if we do this trade deal or we change the current trade deal from this to that, it will have an impact on this sector of this region of the UK on that, etc. So that they can have a much more informed debate in the chamber about our trade deals, and they really, really, really matter. And we know this because, having left the European Union, we are being forced to take other trade deals much more seriously, and not least of all the one with Europe. So I would love to see that happen. So he's already announced that he's going to kick off a bunch of the former guys. I think within the next couple of months, we're going to see the shape of that come forward, and hopefully it will be something much more useful to the government and Parliament and offer some decent scrutiny over trade. And I think that the mood music around Europe will continue to get better. There's a bill going through the Lords. It's a government bill that they decided to put through the Lords first rather than starting it off in the Commons. And it's very boringly named, and I think that's deliberate. It's called the Product Safety and Metrology Bill. And what that is doing is...
Shh, don't tell anyone.
Don't talk about it. It's about getting the EU to recognise UK standards as compatible with theirs. So this is a first step to that, if you like. It's about getting closer regulatory alignment by doing the unilateral bit here in the UK, in the view that once that's gone through, then we've got something to properly talk to the EU about with regards to aligning with lovely high standards, compatible with each other, giving business the certainty it needs. I know that all sounds really, really dull, but it's very, very important. And it's stuff that I'm excited to see
it
coming up. It
sounds really dull by design.
Hopefully it is, yeah.
Literally, it's like, if they had called this the Dynamic Alignment Bill, it would have been all over the Express.
Oh, Alex, don't worry. David Frost has clocked it and is already piping up, telling everyone about it.
The other thing that I would say needs to happen is a little bit of, again, it's a comms related point, but I would like to see a little bit more coordination of the lines going out there a little bit earlier, more people doing media appearances. I think Labour have been largely absent, actually, with the exception of the media round in the morning. Again, that creates a vacuum that gets filled by other stuff that they have no control over. And it's interesting. We have this perception of Tony Blair's government when it came in 97. But I've been reading bits of the Campbell diaries and other diaries that people have been putting out there around the 100-day mark. And I also listened to a really interesting, I might drop a link in the show notes, actually. There was a really interesting episode of The Reunion on Radio 4 that brought together the people of that early Blair administration, sort of key civil servants and spads, to talk about his first 100 days. And you wouldn't believe the amount of rancor and stuff that was going on in the background. But that was the key. The Swan's feet may have been paddling manically, but all you could see above the surface of the water was this beautiful gliding creature of a government. And I think that's what they need to do.
Parallels for Keir Starmer now and what he has to do. Jonathan Powell.
Well, I think the lesson I would take from that, our experience in those first 100 days and that first year, is that your political capital is at its absolute maximum when you're elected. And you shouldn't hoard your political capital. You need to spend it wisely and quickly to try and actually get the benefits later. So we should have taken those measures on public service reform right at the beginning. We left too many of them to too late. We wanted to be sure we had a second Labour term. We were very cautious. We were still carrying that blasted vase the Labour Party has to carry everywhere to make sure that it doesn't drop it. So we missed opportunities.
So the P&O thing is a classic example. I mean, I wouldn't disagree with the sentiment.
Explain to listeners what the P&O thing is.
So Louise Haigh basically came out and she was asked about some stuff that she had said at the time of, P&O Fairies basically sacked everyone by Zoom, I think, and then rehired loads of people and loads of casuals at lower rates. And there was nothing the law could do at the time to prevent that because fire and rehire was a permitted thing to do. And people took a very dim view of that. Really quite rightly,
yep.
Including the government of the day, by the way, including statements being made by Johnson, etc., who were saying this is an absolutely appalling thing. I think Shapps may have been Transport Secretary, and he really was against it. And then she was asked about all that and sort of went with, I guess, the view of an opposition MP. And it's crucial for everyone to understand that they're no longer the opposition. And when you say stuff about a publicly floated company, that's in the middle of negotiating a massive deal with your own government, by the way. The point of the company whose subsidiary P&O is we took on board the firestorm that fire and rehire caused and have made really big efforts to be better, basically. And we're putting our money where our mouth is by coming into this big investment with the government. And you've got a Secretary of State going out there saying everyone boycott P&O. You can't say stuff like that. You can't freelance as a Secretary of State. Stuff like that needs to be cleared from Cabinet.
I don't think it's a hanging offence.
No, of course it's not. Of course it's not.
And I think that politically, a huge number of people agree with her. That's not to say that, you're wrong, that you've got to know the power of your words when you're in a leadership position like Secretary of State. but I think I have a huge sympathy with what she said. And
Oh,
I think
me too.
a lot of people will.
And actually,
And-
Louise Haig is someone that I have a massive amount of time for. I think she's got a fantastically smart head on her shoulders. And I think her plans for her sector are really transformative. And so I hope that this doesn't result in her being shuffled.
Alex, you'll be pleased to know, yes, we have got a special edition of Quiet Riot coming out soon, dedicated to the railways.
I
which of
know.
course is
I've
a very
been
major
listening
part
to
of that
bits
book.
of it, actually.
Ah.
In the studio. I've been listening to the raw audio of your interviews and that, and it's going to be a very exciting episode, I think.
Quiet Riot.
And that's it for this week's Quiet Riot Sunday School. Thank you for joining us in this communion.
Remember, you can follow us on social media, including Blue Sky, at Quiet Riot Pod, or email us on quietriotpod@gmail.com.
And do help keep this show at least vaguely financially viable by supporting us at ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod. And if you can't manage that at the moment, don't worry. There's plenty of other ways to help us out, not least by sharing your favourite episode with a friend to help us grow our listenership. We really do depend on word of mouth because the algorithm on Twitter of old, especially at the moment, it really chokes accounts that don't pay for a blue tick. So if you have retweeted our episode 20 times, maybe a 10th of your followers has seen it.
And if you can help us on the money front, we promise we will not blow it on a blue tick. We will not give Elon Musk even a cent of it. But if you can help us on the money front, then remember you can come along to our Discord channel to chat away with all of us. We really do love getting to know all of our listeners a little bit better. So yeah, if you sign up at ko-fi.com/quietriotpod, then you'll be into our Ko-fi, and then you'll be able to see the Discord channel links from there and come and find us. But for now, enjoy the rest of your weekend. We will be back on Thursday. We love you lots, and goodbye for now.
Bye-bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads, with Naomi Smith, Alex Andreou and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta, artwork by Simona Canelu. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot.
After we recorded, news broke of Alex Salmond shockingly, suddenly dying, and we just wanted to say our thoughts are with his family and loved ones. Condolences from everyone here at Quiet Riot.